Recently, Google released some images and information about their new upcoming smartphone, the Pixel 6. And one of the most interesting of their developments was that they announced that they're going to be making their own custom silicon for this phone, which really made me curious as to why so many companies have been doing that lately. I mean, besides Google, you have Apple with their famed M1, Samsung with their Exynos chips for their phones, Huawei's doing it, and many more. What makes them so special? This is Techonomics. Hey, it's Carlos, always trying to provide you with insight on technology and how it's affecting you and the world at large. It wasn't until recently that companies even had the option to make their own chips. So let's get some context to understand why. At the end of the day, these companies are exactly that, companies. So it shouldn't be a surprise that one of the major factors in making their own chips was money. Buying an existing product just gives another company a profit margin, even if you get a reduced price because of the large quantity of orders. On the other hand, if you make it yourself, you can buy them at cost, which will significantly reduce your overhead. And since you have a direct relationship with the fab that's making the chips, you can negotiate a lower price and even secure the stock that you need, which is very important in times like these where we're seeing a chip shortage, the likes of which we've never seen before. Case in point, Apple. A year and a half into the pandemic, and they have barely felt the chip shortage, if at all. Of course, they are a special case because of the value of their business, and they are, well, Apple. And probably the most important reason for companies to make their own silicon is the hardware integration. Every product has compromises and limitations, and the more of these factors that you can control, the better product you can make. Making their own chips helps manufacturers accommodate for any of the shortcomings their hardware might have, and allows them to tweak the silicon so that the final product always meets or surpasses the customer's expectations. Now, those are just the generic reasons for companies to make their own silicon. Apple, on the other hand, had some more specific reasons that forced their hand to make their M1 SoC. In essence, it all came down to technological advancement, or lack thereof, and a bunch of subcategories that were under that umbrella. First, you had the manufacturing process. Intel was stuck at 14 nanometers for about a decade until just this year, while Apple's M1 was made with a 5 nanometer process, and that was made last year. And the manufacturing process ended up affecting the core count. Intel's 14 nanometer limited their core count on their highest end CPU to 8 cores. The M1 also has 8 cores, the difference being that it's Apple's entry-level SoC. You can only imagine how much better performing the higher level versions are going to be. And speaking of performance, the M1 has way better performance as well, especially because of the high core count, which helps with multi-threaded tasks. Then you have power consumption. Intel has been notorious for guzzling massive amounts of power in order to make their CPUs perform well. But by making their own chips, Apple was able to prioritize efficiency. Better efficiency means less heat, which also made Apple be able to put the M1 on even smaller and more compact machines without compromising on performance. This also meant that Apple didn't have to put extensive cooling solutions on their machines, though better cooling solutions did lead to better performance. In a nutshell, Apple's M1 was really a breath of fresh air to the industry. It untied their hands and allowed them to show what their computers were really capable of. But this leads to another discussion: chip architecture. All the new custom chips like Apple's M1, Samsung's Exynos, and many others have been ARM-based chips, while Intel's and AMD's have been x86. So, what is chip architecture? Well, Central Connecticut State University says it is a description of its basic components and its basic operations. This means that each architecture type has different commands and therefore can be optimized in different ways for different things. So let's highlight some of their differences to understand their pros and cons. And to that point, each of the major architectures adopted 64-bit at different times. x86 did it in 1999, while ARM didn't until 2011. This is important because x86 didn't take advantage of it and ended up keeping their existing instruction set, while ARM did take advantage of the change and made a completely new instruction set. And one of the repercussions of this is that x86 consumes way more power than ARM, which makes ARM significantly more efficient and better performing per watt. On the other hand, x86 can scale up a lot better, meaning that on average, x86 performs better than ARM, they just have to consume significantly more power in the process. And part of the reason for all of this power and efficiency mumbo jumbo is that ARM has implemented a big little design. In practice, this means that ARM chips have big, high-performing cores as well as little, more efficient ones, which allows them to use the efficient cores for simple tasks that don't require a lot of power and the high-performing cores only when absolutely necessary. To top it all off, x86 chips are way harder to scale down compared to ARM, at least in size. And that's just a general consensus that the tech industry has come to because it took Intel almost a decade to bring their manufacturing process down below 14 nanometer. And that's another reason why ARM is better with power efficiency, because a smaller chip uses up less energy. And the last thing to talk about when considering each of these two architectures is that the software and operating systems that are built for them have to be specialized for their respective architectures. It's for that reason that Apple had to update their operating system for the M1 release. And many of the older apps that you can still run on the M1 have to simulate the x86 architecture just to get it to work, even if it does cost some of the performance. That said, the native apps that were built with ARM in mind can take advantage of the new hardware and usually outperform their Intel counterparts. So now that we know why so many manufacturers are making their own chips, it's important to note that not all chips are the same. And for a variety of different factors, some chips provide certain benefits while others provide others. The M1 is obviously the best example because it resulted in a better product in virtually every level compared to Intel. Power consumption, performance, thermals, and many more. Samsung's Exynos chips, on the other hand, at least for the last couple of years, have been notorious for having significantly worse performance than their Qualcomm Snapdragon counterparts. So much so that there was even a push to have Samsung only use Qualcomm chips on their phones. That said, don't hate on Samsung too much because it appears that they've made a deal with AMD to use their RDNA 2 GPUs on their upcoming Exynos chips, which will hopefully lead to better performance and may even outpace Qualcomm. Suffice to say that it's a great time for technology. Companies have so many different options as to what to put inside their machines to make sure that they always perform the best possible. And because of the vast variety of different industries that have sprung up over the past decade, companies have been empowered to make their own solutions. And while results may vary, just look at the M1 versus Exynos, at the end of the day, this is better for consumers because they can choose which product they like more and buy that one. Okay guys, thanks for watching another video. As always, please hit that like button. It really does help with the algorithm. Also, comment down below with what company you think should make their own chips next. As always, this is Carlos from Techonomics, over and out.